from a defabricated solar-powered garden shed in Rockland County, New York, USA, this is Stand Up with Pete Dominic. On today's episode, how to keep your wits about you when your spouse suddenly turns your lovable fuzzy-faced companion into an attack animal. And now, the podcast host who has no worries for such things because he repels evil foes by throwing vermin at them, Pete Dominic!
Pete Co. Sounds like his wife threw a cat at him, and that sounds crazy. I hope everything's all right, Pete. And also, yes, referencing yesterday's episode when I admitted that I threw a dead rat into the woods with the shovel. It's what I do. It's who I am. And I thank you, Pete Co. As always, I have awesome guests, two of them, on today's show. Coming up later, it's Gardening with Kevin Richberg, a great 40-minute conversation where Kevin answers all of my gardening questions. If you're not into gardening or growing things or keeping your lawn, whatever, I still think you're going to like it because Kevin is so damn likable, and I love talking to him, and it's always great. I learn a lot. Kevin Richberg joins me from Slate Hill Edible Forest. That is coming up at about 39 minutes in. But before that, we've got the Glenn Kirschner, the Kirschner Report, former federal prosecutor and big media star now, big YouTuber and podcaster, MSNBC contributor. Glenn Kirschner joins me to go through the latest investigations into Trump and more, and ends our conversation with a really interesting story about his new friendship with Little Steven from the E Street Band, Springsteen's Little Steven. Great conversation with Glenn Kirschner, and that's coming up at about 15 minutes in. It is Thursday. That means I'll be hosting a happy hour hangout. There's a possibility I'll have to cancel it or somehow start later because there's an important Board of Education meeting that I might have to attend and speak at, but I'm not sure how necessary it is that I'm there. I'll find out. I'll let you know. Look for the email, and I might have to do it Friday, but hopefully I'll do it tonight because I love Thursday night hangouts with you. So looking forward to that. Few stories I want to mention, few things I want to play for you as usual here at the top. I always love to give a shout out or read an email from a listener, and I got a great nature shot from Frank Grandy, who's been listening to the show for a long time. And his shot, I'll include it in today's subscriber email, is from Japan, where he is traveling. It's a great shot of Mount Fuji. And I asked Frank what he was doing traveling in Japan, and he said, I retired at the end of last year. I've been doing some bucket list travel since February. I started in Australia, New Zealand. I've made my way through Southeast Asia to Japan, which is the penultimate destination. What I've learned in each place I visited is that I need to revisit each, as there was no way to see everything I wanted to see. The most important thing that travel has taught me is that people are essentially good. Every place I've visited on this trip, the people have been friendly and helpful. And then Frank goes on to write, the one thing that remained constant through this is daily listening to Stand Up with Pete Dominic. Pete, the show is fabulous. You've chosen some great guests. I especially enjoy the Gen Series and getting in touch with what younger folks think. As someone who's on the cusp of being between boomers and Gen X, I'm not always sure where I really fit in demographically, but it's nice to know there are young people coming up behind me who are committed to making the world and the country a better place. I hope you're having a great week. Frank, what an unbelievably thoughtful message, and very kind and very generous and great advice and very positive. I loved reading it, and I loved sharing it with everybody else right now. So I'm glad you've taken us with you. It's great to be on that journey with you, and I look forward to more pictures and messages from the road. Send me your emails to standupwithpete@gmail.com. All right, here is some news from the last 24 hours from Wednesday, the 3rd of May, as chosen by me. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates for the 10th time in just over a year, but signaled it could be done lifting rates. That'd be nice for everybody, especially folks who are working for a living. President Trump apparently will not call any witnesses, his lawyers won't, to rebut E. Jean Carroll's account of him raping and defaming her. I talked with Glenn Kirschner about that and extensively in today's conversation. New York State has banned natural gas and other fossil fuels in most new buildings, which is an awesome development. Test scores in the U.S. history and civics for 8th graders fell to the lowest levels on record, while Republicans are trying to erase history. Well, so that's not going to trend in a better direction anytime soon, I'm guessing. And in New York City, a story that captured the nation's attention and probably a lot more outside of America is that a New York City subway passenger was choked to death. And some people are celebrating the guy who choked him as a hero. New York City medical examiner ruled that a subway rider was killed by a chokehold after a fight with another passenger that was caught on camera. Have you seen this video yet? Officials say Jordan Neely's death was caused by homicide from compression of the neck, a chokehold. Video of the incident shows Neely, 30, struggling as another man grabs him and holds him on the ground. Police have questioned and released a 24-year-old U.S. Marine who restrained the passenger. The incident happened on Monday afternoon in Soho section of Manhattan. The video was captured by a freelance journalist on the train, shows the former Marine holding a 30-year-old man who is said to have been acting erratically around the neck for 2 minutes and 55 seconds. And, well, it's a huge story, and it's absolutely outrageous. I can't believe that some people are reacting like the guy's a hero. I mean, he straight up murdered him, is my interpretation. I mean, I've been on the subway in New York City for years and years and years. I've seen all kinds of mentally ill people, such as this guy, yelling and screaming, sometimes even getting violent. The idea that someone would put him in that kind of a chokehold and keep him there for that long, it's just astonishing. And the reactions are even worse. Here's just a few tweets about it, and then I'll leave it alone for today. But here's one from at McMansion Hell. Most of us are far closer to having a public mental breakdown or being homeless than we are to amassing money and power in the society. The fact that we've all lost empathy for people in distress, have replaced it with groundless fear and disgust is unbelievably dark. Brady Jensen tweets, people deserve to feel safe in their own city. Yeah, obviously. And people includes those made to live perilous lives due to an ever-diminishing safety net and increasingly open social derision and viciousness. Adam Serwer, if a homeless man makes me uncomfortable, the sentence is death, is the kind of argument I think people should be embarrassed to make in public. One more, at the Law Boy. Mentally ill homeless people are downstream of a dozen policy issues that conservatives don't give a shit about. They won't fund mental health services or housing, but as soon as they see a human being directly affected by those choices, they think it should be legal to murder him. Just a few reactions that I saw on Twitter yesterday to this shocking video showing a New York City subway passenger putting a clearly mentally ill man who had not committed any violence in a chokehold that killed him. I'm sure we all have a lot more to say about that at the Hangout and together and react to it in the coming days, but that story is definitely not over. I do want to head down to Texas, where I mentioned last week here on the podcast, you probably heard about this. Texas is promoting a bill that would require the 10 Commandments to be posted in public classrooms. And it's not going to pass. I don't think even this right-wing Supreme Court will consider it constitutional. But that hasn't stopped Texas legislators from trying to get it passed. The bill's supporters insist the 10 Commandments are inspired by many of the country's founding documents, but those opposed to the proposal, of course, where it could exclude other religions and infringe on student and teacher rights to free religious expression. The House Committee on Public Education on Tuesday heard an overview of the bill, which generated a heated debate, and Adam Sullivan, longtime listener, sent me this link to the audio from Texas State Representative, former middle school teacher, 8th-generation Texan, a guy who identifies as a Christian himself. This audio is so good. He is so smart, and I want to share it with you right now. Riveting stuff here as he's arguing with the bill's author.
I say this to you as a fellow Christian. Representative, I know you're a devout Christian, and so am I. This bill, to me, is not only unconstitutional, it's not only un-American, I think it is also deeply unchristian. And I say that because I believe this bill is idolatrous, I believe it is exclusionary, and I believe it is arrogant. And those three things, in my reading of the gospel, are diametrically opposed to the teachings of Jesus. You probably know Matthew 6:5, when Jesus says, don't be like the hypocrites who love to pray publicly on street corners. When you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. A religion that has to force people to put up a poster to prove its legitimacy is a dead religion. And it's not one that I want to be a part of. It's not one that I think I am a part of. You know that in Scripture it says faith without works is what? Is dead. My concern is instead of bringing a bill that will feed the hungry, clothe the naked, heal the sick, we're instead mandating that people put up a poster. And we both follow a teacher, a rabbi, who said, don't let the law get in the way of loving your neighbor. Loving your neighbor is the most important law. It is the summation of all the law and all the prophets. I would submit to you that our neighbor also includes the Hindu student who sits in a classroom, the Buddhist student who sits in a classroom, and an atheist student who sits in a classroom. And my question to you is, does this bill truly love those students?
I'm going to go a different direction than I think you're trying to lead me.
All right. Well, let's listen to a little bit more. It gets better. James Tallarico, Texas State Representative.
Every time on this committee that we try to teach students values like empathy or kindness, we're told we can't because that's the parents' role. Every time on this committee that we try to teach basic sex education to keep our kids safe, we're told that's the parents' role. But now you're putting religious commandments, literal commandments, in our classrooms, and you're saying that's the state's role. Why is that not the parents' role?
That's really an interesting rabbit trail that you've gone on with that.
Okay.
Not only
let's get a little bit more.
Would you be comfortable with adding language to receive parental consent from all the parents of students in the classroom before putting it up?
I would not. I am, again, going to keep it clean as it came over.
So you don't want parental consent when it comes to students receiving religious commandments?
I don't believe that. I think that these are foundational to being a good citizen.
Oh, wait, there's more.
I don't always think that the legislature obeys the Ten Commandments. So I just want to walk through a couple. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Are you aware the legislature is scheduled to meet this Saturday?
I am aware of that.
So that would be violating the Ten
I contend that is you're right.
Thou shalt not kill. Are you aware the legislature has refused to outlaw the death penalty?
We're using the words that are on the monument because it has been upheld by the Supreme Court. But we're talking about murder here and not justice, and certainly not war.
The translation that I'm looking at in your bill is "Thou shalt not kill."
Absolutely, and that is that. And the reason we are using that language again is because that is the language that has been upheld by the Supreme Court.
Thou shalt not commit adultery.
Be true to the one you love.
Okay. All right. One more.
The second commandment, which I think is the most important, thou shalt not make to thyself any graven image, meant to prevent idolatry,
Absolutely.
The creation of idols. The idea that some people would try to make an object, maybe 2 tablets, to worship rather than worshiping the God behind those 2 tablets. Are you worried that this bill is idolatrous?
I do not.
The second commandment.
And lastly,
would you be open to an amendment to the bill saying that if a member of the legislature violates these commandments, that we can no longer mandate public school teachers put it in classrooms?
It is my intention to keep this bill clean as it came over from the Senate.
Okay, well, that's about enough. There's more, but that's James Tallarico, Texas state legislator, making a whole hell of a lot of sense with someone who is way out of her league in that debate and pointing to all the contradictions and all the hypocrisies And I just couldn't get enough of that. Thank you to Adam Sullivan for sending that to me, and hopefully you appreciate it as well. All right, well, coming up, I've got a great conversation about gardening and lawn care and so much more. We talked composting. We talked about invasive species and native species. And really good. Always great with Kevin Richberg. But first, we've got the legend, Glenn Kirschner, joining us. He, of course, is a 30-year veteran as a federal prosecutor, former JAG officer. You know him, of course, as a CNN contributor, and he's a big star now on YouTube. Justice Matters on YouTube, and now its own podcast. He's on Twitter, where he's also a monster, of course. Glenn Kirschner, too. He breaks down the complex legal issues in ways that are understandable, relatable, and usable, and that's just one of the reasons I love him. He's a real good friend to me. And you should go support him over on his Patreon channel, subscribe to his YouTube channel and podcast. Go listen to that. He's doing long form now. He's explaining a little bit here at the top about the new podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the Kirschner Report. GlennKirschner.com. Glenn Kirschner.
Glenn Kirschner, thank you for joining me. Hi.
Pete, how you doing?
What's the difference between you're doing a podcast and the YouTube? I feel like you're putting out something every day on both.
Yes. So here's the secret. Okay. What we do is we strip the audio off the YouTube video. We drop that as a podcast during the week. And then I do an original content hour-long audio podcast every weekend where I get to talk about stuff near and dear to my heart, like reforming our broken government, our criminal justice system, and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I'm kind of cheating a little bit. It's a twofer.
No, it's not cheating at all. I just want to know if I'm getting the same thing. I want to know if I'm missing any of the Kirsch.
No, as long as you listen to the original content audio podcast on the weekend, then you're going to get it all.
That sounds really great. I didn't realize you were doing that, and I really do. I always want to hear, and I want to ask you today your thoughts on things outside the legal realm. But first of all, I want to ask you about the E. Jean Carroll case, but. In your video, you said something that I was slightly offended by because you said Joey Tacopina, Trump's lawyer. You said Trump's lawyer, Joey Tacopina, and then you took a beat, you took a pause, and then you said, I know. I felt like it was anti-Italian, and I felt personally that you were attacking my people.
You know, it's not anti-Italian, it's anti-Joey Tacopina. Because, you know, listen, I embrace everybody's right to confront and cross-examine their accuser under the Sixth Amendment. But there's a way to do it. You don't have to be insulting. You don't have to be demeaning. You don't have to be combative and argumentative and violate the rules of evidence. But the judge kept having to sua sponte, as we say, jump in. Let me tell you, Pete, it is such a blunder when the judge has to, on his own, intervene and tell the jury in substance, this guy's wrong. He's violating the rules. Let me tell you, when I was trying cases and the defense attorney was doing stuff wrong, sometimes I just kind of sat back and I waited for the judge to be the one to call the lawyer out because that's so damaging to a lawyer's credibility. And that's what the judge kept having to do. He kept having to brush back Joey Tacopina.
The pregame analysis was in these types of cases where it's obviously a sensitive issue, sexual assault, rape, the lawyer, in this case, interrogating the victim, has to be careful, has to be thoughtful. And the analysis was, this guy's a tough guy, Joey Tacopina guy. So how is he going to do this? And apparently from the reporting and from what the judge said, not well. He did not handle it very well. And that matters because the jury watches the behavior.
Yeah, because look, E. Jean Carroll's testimony was pretty much the whole ball game. Now, it's great that the jury gets to hear the Access Hollywood tape because Donald Trump announced what he does. I walk up to women, I grab them by the pee. When you're a star, they let you do it. I wish he would have added, and you know what? They usually don't even scream.
Right.
Because that was really all Joey Tacopina had to go after E. Jean Carroll. You didn't scream. And you didn't report it. You know what, Pete? I was a prosecutor for 30 years. I dealt with more victims of crime than I could ever count. Robbery victim, we never say, hey, you didn't scream,
right,
so you weren't robbed. Your house was burglarized, but you didn't scream, so it didn't happen. It is so offensive because we all know it is our common experience that when somebody is all of a sudden a crime victim, they react in all sorts of ways. They go into shock. They go into self-preservation mode. You know how many victims will say, I thought if I screamed, I'd get hit, I'd get hurt, I'd get killed. I just did anything I could to survive. And often in the setting of a rape, there is no screaming. There is no fighting back. People are doing whatever they can do under the circumstances to survive the victimization.
The reporting on this case is interesting. And why aren't we able to see or hear this case? We're trusting, I guess, people who are in the room.
Yeah, I do wish, listen, back during the OJ trial when you saw people playing for the camera and, I think it tended to impact the proceedings in a negative way. In this day and age where there are cameras everywhere and everybody can watch things that are being streamed, I think it would be so valuable to see what's going on inside courtrooms. Courtrooms are public proceedings. They are intended. They are designed to be seen by the public, but, they will only seat 50 people. So you're really going to limit public access to 50 people? Boy, I wish we would open up courtrooms to cameras because I actually think it would enhance our sense of the quality of judging and of lawyering for the most part. When we got to see the George Floyd trial, there were some very good lawyers. Even the defense attorney did the best he could with what he had, which wasn't much. Boy, the prosecutors were respectful. The judge was strong and on point. The witnesses performed well. I think that enhances the reputation of our criminal justice system.
E. Jean Carroll bravely took the stand. Donald Trump, of course, did not. His case is going to wrap up in, a couple more days. It's a civil case. It's not about sexual assault. It's about defamation regarding what E. Jean Carroll said was sexual assault. And what could be the possible conclusions of this case? What could be the possible outcomes?
So it's either going to be a verdict for E. Jean Carroll, and then the question will shift to what kind of damages did she suffer and how much should she be compensated financially for those damages? Or the jury could find in favor of Donald Trump, and that's the end of that. But, no, Donald Trump is not going to land himself in a jail cell or an orange jumpsuit. This is a civil case, so it's really about monetary damages. And think about the kind of damage E. Jean Carroll suffered. Let's assume the jury finds for her. I mean, she was raped back in the 90s by her own account. It altered her life in ways that are kind of incalculable. How do you make somebody whole for a lifetime that was so dramatically altered as a result of being sexually assaulted? That's tough to put a dollar amount on.
No, unless you have a time machine, that's impossible for a lot of people who are victims or survivors of that kind of a crime. But it won't be, that Trump was found guilty of rape. It'll be that he defamed her and owes her now whatever the jury or whatever they decide.
Yeah, there are actually two counts. There's a battery count. Battery is an unlawful touching, so basically a sexual assault count, and a defamation count.
Oh.
These are brought under that new New York law that allows, even though there was no reporting of it at the time, plaintiffs have a year under this new New York law to file. So she filed a battery count and a defamation count.
I want to ask you about Jack Smith and why he was in the room when Mike Pence testified. First of all, why was Mike Pence there? This is the case about January 6th and what he knew. What is Jack Smith? What is the prosecutor? What is the crime they're looking to prosecute here? And what, if anything, does Mike Pence offer? 5 hours. Jack Smith in the room, apparently.
Mike Pence can offer some of the most directly and sharply incriminating information about and against Donald Trump. And here's why. We all know, based on the reporting, that Donald Trump waged a relentless pressure campaign on Mike Pence, trying to convince him to violate the law, the Electoral Count Act, and deny Joe Biden his rightful election win. To Mike Pence's credit, he refused to do it. But Trump pressured him and pressured him and pressured him. Every word out of Donald Trump's mouth that Mike Pence can relate to the grand jury is directly admissible evidence. It's called a statement by a party opponent. Here's the beauty of it. We've all seen the reporting that Trump called him a wimp. He called him the P word. I guess it's one of Donald Trump's favorite words.
Yep.
He berated him. You're weak. You're not strong enough. But here's what he said, and this comes from his book. And it's a really important nugget of incriminating information because it tells us not only about Donald Trump's criminal act, but it tells us about Donald Trump's criminal intent, which is the most challenging thing to prove when you're bringing a prosecution against somebody. He said, you know what your problem is, Pence? You're too honest.
Right.
What does that tell us about Donald Trump's intent? He knew that what he was urging Mike Pence to do called for dishonesty. That shows his corrupt intent. That will be a marquee piece of evidence at the trial in the United States of America versus Donald Trump. And I'm glad Jack Smith fought as hard and as aggressively as he did to get Mike Pence's butt in the grand jury chair. And I think there's a beautiful irony in the fact that Mike Pence named his book, titled his book, So Help Me God, because those are the last words he heard when he was sworn in and began giving incriminating testimony against Donald Trump.
Glenn, I have a theory. Going to run it by you. It's a political theory. Mike Pence may run for president. If Donald Trump is found guilty in this case, he's disqualified from running for president. So why wouldn't Mike Pence want to help Jack Smith? And he's tried to look reticent. He's tried to, look like he didn't want to cooperate because he wants to keep the Trump base, which is ridiculous because they hate him. So it's a preposterous, stupid thing. But Mike Pence is not known for his intelligence. What do you think about that conspiracy theory I just created? Mike Pence wants Trump to be found guilty so he doesn't have to compete against him in the presidential election.
It shows how devious your mind is, Pete. It's a great theory. Look, Mike Pence would sell out Mother if it meant he might, be in the Oval Office someday. And by mother, I mean his wife. So I think that's a great theory. Mike Pence put up a front like, look, I'm trying to, not incriminate Donald Trump, but gosh whiz, the courts have now ordered me to testify. So what else could I have done? Listen, somebody said, I wish I could take credit for it, that Mike Pence is like the Bruce Willis character in The Sixth Sense. He's the only one who doesn't know he's politically dead, right? He is not a viable candidate. Who's going to vote for him? The Hang Mike Pence block? Come on now. Mike Pence but Mike Pence thinks he's still in play politically. So he may have ultimately been happy to incriminate Donald Trump at the end of the day.
The Hang Mike Pence is actually an anti-Pence super PAC name. I got to ask you, so anything else about Jack Smith? I mean, when do we find out? What's the timeline? Do we have any idea about when the special prosecutor is going to wrap up his case?
We don't, but it will be longer than we would all like. I have a feeling, if not a fear, that there is still a long way to go in the insurrection investigation. I think the classified documents investigation is closer to coming to fruition with an indictment. But, I wish this was not the case. I still think we are months off from seeing a federal indictment. We'll probably see a Georgia state indictment first.
Well, that was going to be my next question. My next case to get to ask you about Fani Willis, the attorney general there. Apparently, she's requested security for late summer or something like that, which is unprecedented. What else have we learned about Fani Willis? They've got this whole fake electors thing, which seems to be one of the issues dragging this out. I don't know.
Yeah, I think those are both worth touching on. So the fake electors thing, there was one lawyer representing 10 fake electors, and they were all targets of Fani Willis's criminal investigation. The problem is really twofold. The reporting is some of the fake electors wanted to flip and narc out other fake electors. When you're an attorney, you can't represent people like that who have competing interests. You have to withdraw from the representation, but this lawyer didn't want to do it for whatever reason. So Fani Willis had to go to court and file a motion to disqualify that lawyer. And the other thing, and this is a big ethical misstep, in that same motion, Fani Willis said that Fani Willis, had extended immunity offers to some of these fake electors in 2022. And the fake electors, the clients, said, our attorney never told us about that.
Have you ever heard anything like that?
No, Pete, look, if a prosecutor offers an enormous benefit to a client and the defense attorney fails to communicate it to the client, that is a disbarable offense if it is true.
Why would an attorney not give his or her client that out? Because the only thing you can guess is because the attorney's interests are with, in this case, Donald Trump. Like they were trying to protect Trump. I mean, why would they do that?
That makes the most sense. This attorney was not zealously representing her client. She was representing the interests of somebody else, maybe Donald Trump. Just think about what the lawyer that Trump world gave to Cassidy Hutchinson did. Said, look, Cass, we're here to protect Donald Trump. And he basically urged her, the reporting is, to not be forthcoming with the J6 committee because we don't want to dirty up Trump that way. That's insanity. That's disbarable. That's obstruction of justice. It could be a criminal offense. So it feels like that's also what was going on down in Georgia. Here's the other piece, though, down in Georgia, Pete. When Fani Willis put out that letter to law enforcement, hey, law enforcement, I need you all to know that in July or August, I'm going to be indicting a whole bunch of people, and I just want you to prepare. Pete, that was not for law enforcement's benefit. You can have a behind closed door meeting with law enforcement when you're a district attorney. That was for the benefit of the 20 plus targets of her investigation. She was sending a message to them. Listen, you got one last chance to come in, accept responsibility, cooperate with the prosecution, and we will reduce your exposure, maybe give you a pass completely. And if you don't, come July or August, you're going to see your name on the other side of the V, Georgia versus you. What you going to do, sport?
So we're kind of waiting, and we won't know if they come in.
We won't know we won't know if cooperation deals are struck unless they walk into court and enter a guilty plea with cooperation. That's when we will learn about it. But Pete, if I were to plead a cooperator out, I'm not going to reveal that prematurely. I'm going to keep it under seal for as long as I can until I have completed my investigation and I'm ready to announce all public indictment.
Makes sense. Final thing I want to ask you about is the Fox News Dominion lawsuit, Tucker Carlson's firing. What are your top line thoughts about the legal case? And, you know, you're a media guy now. You understand the responsibility and take responsibility for what you say on MSNBC or YouTube or on your podcast or here with me. What are your thoughts on that case and that it led to I think it's pretty easy to say it was connected, one part of why Tucker Carlson is no longer with us at 8 p.m.
Tucker's termination is good for America. It's good for our democracy. You know, I don't know what the impact will ultimately be because they'll put somebody else, hopefully not equally bad, but perhaps equally bad in the 8 p.m. time slot. But boy, you know, their audience has already dropped by half at 8 p.m. So that's a good start. And I think today's revelation about Tucker saying, you know, he wished that the three white guys had beaten the Antifa kid to death. I mean, what you have no humanity, I guess. So I'm glad Dominion fought long and hard and ultimately took the settlement because I do think we saw most of the really good, juicy stuff as a result of the discovery in the Dominion Fox lawsuit that was revealed. Of course, Smartmatic. I mean, listen, this is Act One. Smartmatic is suing Fox for twice as much as Dominion. Even more importantly, there is a class action lawsuit that has been brought by Fox's own shareholders. That's going to be devastating. They've had to pay out their shareholders multiple times, sometimes in the tens of millions of dollars previously. And then you've got Tucker Carlson's producer who has a strong suit to bring, and she has brought against Fox. I have a feeling this could be the beginning of the end of Fox financially, but, you know, it's anybody's guess.
All good analysis. As always, I greatly appreciate all of it, and thank you for by the way, Tucker Carlson said it's not how white people fight. You're a fighter. You've been in some fights. How do we fight? I don't know. I don't understand that. Do you have any idea how we fight?
Yeah, that's born of prejudice. I mean, I know how I fought in the boxing ring, and usually it involved receiving more punches than I delivered.
Is that what he meant?
Look, I mean, look, he is a hateful person, and when you start talking about wanting to see three white guys beat an Antifa guy to death, you are not somebody who needs to be polluting the public airwaves.
That's for damn sure. All right, sir. Much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Great seeing you, Pete.
Oh, wait, there's more. There's bonus Kirschner, because we kept talking, and I said, wait, can I record this part? Because I thought this is an interesting story. Let's go back to it.
Go ahead. What about Little Steven?
Yeah, so Little Steven, Bruce Springsteen's ride or die lead guitarist for the last 50 years. In his book, Unrequited Infatuations, he tells the story about being over in South Africa on sort of a listening tour because he wanted to figure out what he as one musician could do to help fight against South African apartheid. He tells this story, and he says, I'm in a cab in Pretoria, white cab driver. We're driving down the street, and a black man steps off the curb into the street, and the taxi driver swerves to hit him for sport. And he said, Stephen went into shock. He said, yeah, because that was not unusual. Just hitting a black guy for sport. He said, let me out, let me out. He said he got out. He starts wandering around. He ends up in this park. He sees all these statues to like South African generals, white guys. And he said, I look at one of the statues and I said, I'm taking you down, mother. And that is when he went about creating Artists United Against Apartheid. Ain't gonna play Sun City. He's like, look, I may just be a musician, but I can do something. And that had the effect of putting some economic pressure because musical acts were no longer going to Sun City to play. And he's like, look, I didn't bring down apartheid in South Africa, but I had a little piece of it.
Right.
And that's the man he is. And what I love about him, and I've been backstage at the last two Springsteen concerts that were in DC and Baltimore with Stephen because we've become fast friends. If you listen to his music, his solo albums, the theme of justice runs through everything. And that's why I have loved and plugged into his music from day one.
That's so cool that you've met him and become friendly with him because you're a Jersey boy, mainly. You know,
I am a Jersey guy.
Also, Jamie Raskin, you know him, right? I mean, is he going to run for senator now that Hardin has announced he's stepping down? Who was it?
I would love to see him run. I had the pleasure of being on stage with Representative Raskin for Stephanie Miller's tour in D.C. So, you know, he and I were kind of doing the 1-2 of law and justice and talking about what's going on. So, yeah, I think the world of him. I've been on air with him on a panel as well. And I mean, that dude is the real deal.
Yeah.
You know, he knows constitutional law inside and out. And, you know, when you listen to him, he's a great orator. He doesn't talk over people or above people. And, you know, we could do no better than to have him, you know, continue to work his way up the political ladder.
No, you don't know him well enough to know if he would be considered. You don't know the inside scoop on whether or not he's considering.
No inside scoop there now.
All right. I'm going to hit stop again then.
All right. There you go. Glenn Kirschner, everybody. GlennKirschner.com. DJ Monzik made his website. DJ's a longtime listener and supporter of the show. He did my website as well. And yeah, I'm not pushing him to do yours because I'm not sure how much more work he wants. He's got a really great gig. He's a super talented guy, but he did Glenn's website, GlennKirschner.com. If you're looking for a web designer and someone who's really great and trustworthy, you could definitely reach out to him. Reach out to me, and I'll hook you up with DJ Monzik. But more importantly, Glenn, thank you very much for joining me. Go subscribe to his podcast and support him on Patreon if you want. And thank you for supporting me. One of my supporters and listeners and really good friends now is Kevin Richberg, and Kevin is a super smart guy. He joins us most Thursdays at the Hangouts. He lives in my hometown, which is just a coincidence. He listened to the show and happened to grow up where I grew up, well, the town next to me, and he's a farmer. He is the co-founder of Slate Hill Edible Forests. And you should check out his really cool website, slatehilledibleforest.com. You could book him for a consultation. His orchard is located in central New York, a 27-acre fruit orchard, biodiversity collection, and experimental farm focused on adaptation to climate change. Super smart guy, went to University of California, went to MIT, has traveled the world, has been to the bottom of the ocean. He's been to over 100 countries. You can read many of his dispatches that are still up over at the Huffington Post. And I asked Kevin because it's spring and because I'm big into gardening and nature and planting things, and I'm not great at it, but I'm continuously trying to learn and experimenting as inspired by people like Kevin and many of you. I founded the Stand Up Garden page on Facebook. It's a Facebook group. We have over 1,000 members. I'll post the video of my interview today with Kevin up there first and then everywhere else. By the way, youtube.com/standupwithpete. Go subscribe to that. I've been posting Odessa, my intern, and I have been posting a whole bunch of stuff over there. So go subscribe to youtube.com/standupwithpete now. All right, but Kevin answered a whole bunch of my questions. I think you're going to like it if you do any kind of planting this time of year, from flowers to a garden to your lawn. And even if you don't, you'll still like it because Kevin's so great. For more about Kevin, check out the show notes and, of course, his website. Let's do it right now with Kevin Richberg.
All right, here he is. I've told you all about him. He's the master. He's stooping down to us amateurs to give us insight on things that are so easy for him, but maybe not for us, and information. Thank you. Welcome back, and thank you for joining us for a springtime gardening advice segment.
It's great to be here. A lot of this stuff is not easy for anyone. Don't assume that there is a magic elixir that solves all gardening problems. These things are complex.
I understand, and I appreciate that.
There's a lot of myths out there too. I want to talk about some myths.
Yeah, let's bust some myths, but let's just what I was thinking was starting with is when you see people paying a lot of money for something that they really shouldn't, meaning like a bag of dirt maybe. I buy a lot of bags of dirt and mulch. Recently, I found that I could get free compost and mulch in my town, and that's been awesome. But what do you have to say about anything that we buy that we might even spend a lot of money on for our lawn or garden that's really kind of wasteful that we could do cheaper, or it just doesn't work or whatever?
That's a category that includes almost everything in the lawn and garden center.
Is that right? Oh,
it's funny that you're mentioning the one thing I'm not sure that I would skimp on, especially potting soil. We've talked about this before, that if you go out and say, well, I'm going to save money and just dig dirt out of my garden and then plant things in it, you can come up with some pretty heinous results and a lot of death and not know why. So that I would actually recommend people do is buy what's called sterile potting soil whenever they want to put things in pots. That is a good buy. But as far as chemical fertilizers, lawn weed and feed, and then pesticides and herbicides, things, going to the lawn care center or the nursery and saying, I want to change the nature of what's happening in my garden because I don't like X, Y, or Z. I want a fix. If you look at it like that, you can think of a lot of the things that are sold there as being, they're taking your money. They want your money. You're not necessarily going to be able to get results that are worth the money that you're giving.
Lawn feed, all those things that they feed, fertilizer, they're not worth it.
It's a lot of times not even necessary. I'll bet you right now, if you Google how to have a good lawn or things you must do for your lawn, almost every list will include fertilizing, depending on where you live. And I got to be careful about this because I know northern North America temperate lawns, and I understand that if I say certain things that apply specifically to us up here in the north, you're going to get some letters from folks in the South. There's a blind spot for me right there. I don't think I could walk into a Southern lawn because they have completely different constituents that need to react to different cues from their environment and do a good job. But as far as our lawns are concerned, if you have a good amount of clover in your lawn, I don't know how you feel about clover in your lawn.
I'm fine with it.
You're good with it? If you have a good amount of clover in your lawn and all you do is mow, your lawn is going to be perfectly fine because it's essentially self-fertilizing if you are not bagging your clippings. So if all you do is spread the stuff out, a lot of people don't do that because they don't want to, or were told at some point not to. And then they go buy fertilizer and put it on their lawn. And that's a total waste. You're essentially taking the natural decomposition material from the cuttings themselves, which will in fact just refeed your lawn. And if you have a lot of clover in it, it'll refeed your lawn then some, because the clover has been fixing nitrogen and providing its own free natural fertilizer from the air. Save that 15 to 20 bucks, spread the clippings on your lawn. Don't fertilize.
There's a movement to not mow your lawn. What do you think of that? And I feel badly when I mow my lawn in early spring or any time when there's dandelions and cute little flowers popping through, because I know those are pollinators and the bees like them. But I do have to mow my lawn at some point. So maybe I raise the blade a little bit, but I usually end up chopping the heads off. Just a real genocide of dandelions and flowers. And I feel bad about that. But what are your thoughts on people just letting it all go and at the same time also, cutting it all down?
We've practiced that, actually. So from personal experience at the farm, we let huge acre sections of what would be considered lawn just go for months and months at a time. Let it go all the way up to 2-3 feet, and then went in and cut it back slowly. I'll tell you one thing, don't go in with your lawnmower on a 2-foot lawn at 3 inches and try to plow through that, because that'll just end in tears.
And ticks.
And a lot of sadness. The highest setting possible on the lawnmower, if you do decide to do this, all the way to the top, and go back later and do successively smaller. Please. Best advice I can give in the podcast.
Is it true, though, what about the flower thing?
Yeah.
Dandelion thing?
My advice on lawns and dandelions is you cannot stop that. That's something people really want to do. And I would encourage you to ask yourself why. Dandelions are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. They are going to reproduce. The seeds are going to come in from all of your neighbors. There's literally nothing you can do about it. If your friends are judging you based on your lawn and whether or not it has dandelions in it, get new friends.
Get new friends. I agree with that.
Yeah. Try to do the psychological activity, like you said, of simply leaving them, let them all go. If it hurts you when they start to go, usually they'll start to go to seed on a particular day. You'll be able to catch it all. And you can go out there and say, okay, I'm going to mow this day just because I can't take it anymore. But what you've essentially done, if you let them go all the way to that point, you're not going to stop the reseeding. You're just not. It's a part of our natural world. And so mental acceptance is probably the best way to go with that, in my opinion. But when you do leave out all those flowers, you are leaving a huge pollination source,
right?
Nectar and pollen that not just honeybees, all sorts of insects. You sit down and watch dandelions over the course of the day, they are visited by everybody. And so, yeah, you think of it like that and try to be happier with it. I understand that goes against hundreds of years of American ethos, but it's the 21st century, new thinking.
I'm inspired by visiting your farm and your home because you've always got a lot of experiments going. You've got a lot of pots in different places. I want to grow. I want to do experiments. I want to grow things in pots, small pots, big pots. Can you grow anything in a pot? Tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchini, if you have the right size pot and the right soil mix, especially because at like my house, the sun, trees get bigger, the sun, I never know where the sun's going to be the most and the longest and so on. I like to try different spots so you can move those pots. Can you grow anything in a pot if you do it right?
The short answer is yes. I'm also concerned that you don't know where the sun is going to be. We need to talk about that later.
Well, I don't know. I don't know. where the prime amount of sun is for a tomato, much less a sunflower. I mean, I don't know if it matters if I have it.
It does matter. It does matter. I was concerned that generally you didn't know where the sun was going to be.
I don't know where. I see it up there.
It's up there. It's up there somewhere. Pots. Yes. Containers. Container gardening is really big right now.
Bags too, but a lot of people use bags now.
Bags are great. We used bags for the first year, a lot of bags, probably too many bags. But I'll give everyone a tip on bags. They're absolutely great for the plants because of a thing called root pruning. When the roots get to the outside, they hit air and they naturally don't do things they do in a solid pot. In a solid pot, they'll turn on themselves, strangle each other, and they can become problematic. They won't do that in a fabric pot because the air causes them to stop growing because they think they're outside the soil, so they don't keep going. It's called air pruning. The one caveat is, boy, those dry out real fast.
Yeah.
You got to watch if you're willing to water, and I'm sure we're going to talk about saucers. That's a huge concern with pots. But I want to say that my short answer is that yes, containers can do almost anything, and you can become a container gardening expert by learning the pro tips, the steps of mostly what not to do. And if you're diligent about it, you can get some super amazing results that don't come with any of the weed pressures or you can have a pot where the one thing that's growing in the pot is the thing that you want and it's doing well.
I mean, doesn't the size and shape of the pot matter because it's the size, shape, and behavior of the root system?
Yes, but you can get away with some things so a tomato in the out in your garden will send feeder roots down 3 feet or more into the ground without even batting an eyelash. Even in some really hard soils, they'll get down there. So if you have a pot that's only 1 foot deep, in essence, you're saying, okay, you're going to live in this small constricted space, but you're also removing all of the plant's competitors by placing it in a pot. So essentially you're saying to the tomato, I've given you this cubic foot, hopefully a little bit more for a big tomato, if you can manage it, but you get the entire cubic foot. Where in a garden, unless you are weeding constantly and being meticulous, now you can get better results in raised beds. But if you're just in an old traditional flat garden, all those roots are going to have to compete with everything else that's living out there, including the trees that are as far away as 50, 100, 150 feet. You may not think that. Their roots, their feeder roots, they're under there. And all your tomatoes do have to compete with the trees, even though they may seem like they're very far away.
So it's about control. You can control so much more in the pots.
You can control so much more, and that the plant has access to the space without competition.
Right.
All plants have evolved to have to deal with their competitors. No plant comes up in a space where it is itself alone. And
let's talk about water and that saucer. Did a saucer touch you? Why? What's wrong?
The saucer is death. That's why it's called the saucer of death. A lot of people want to catch water because they're used to having plants inside. The saucers go underneath so it doesn't make a mess. That makes sense. The number one thing you can do to anything in a container that is bad for it is let that saucer fill up with water. What happens is that water goes anoxic. The oxygen inside goes away very, very quickly. And all the baddies, we're a pro-oxygen. This is a pro-oxygen gardening podcast. Oxygen all the time. Our enemy is when oxygen goes away and you have what's called anaerobic organisms that are the pathogens that it's true for us. Anaerobic organisms make us sick. Anaerobic organisms can do damage to your plants. And if you get a root rot or a root disease or those organisms take hold, there is very little you can do.
Huh.
to fix that problem. And the saucer of death, that water catching. And so when people put them outside, they're thinking, well, the plant will just suck up the water. The pot will suck up the water. So I'll just leave the water there. No, don't do that. That's a big no-no. It is better to have a dry plant that is struggling to get water than a diseased plant that caught something from the anaerobic conditions in that saucer.
No saucers.
Saucers if you know what you're doing, but no saucers.
Do I put rocks at the bottom of my
yeah, some people do that.
Container to help it drain better? That's
an old farmer's almanac trick that people used to put clay shards at the bottom.
Yeah.
It's not really a necessary. It's not really necessary if you have an environment, like I'll speak to our environment. If it's raining regularly, folks in the desert, you're going to have a completely different situation going. They're probably laughing at us right now. The desert folk who are gardening in the desert. Rain, what's that? But the people, if it's raining or you're watering, you want that water to be draining through naturally, like it would in the environment. That it would seep through. There'd be a period of wetness, then that would change to dryness. The plant in your pot or container will actually be moving the water around itself, bringing it inside its body and then leaving through the leaves. And that's how the growing season in the summer, almost all the water leaves your container. It's not through the evaporation of the container. It's the plant putting the water back into the atmosphere.
I want to talk about composting, but before I get to composting, I want to talk about what in my kitchen I have heard is good to throw in the garden, like eggshells and coffee grinds and other things. Are there things that we should be saving? And because we're also being more sustainable that way, we're not creating more waste that we're sending to the landfill. Should I be keeping my coffee grinds, my eggshells, my banana peels, or anything else that I've heard that I'm supposed to keep and throw in the garden? And then I get overwhelmed. I'm like, well, maybe the eggshells and the coffee grinds and the banana peels are good for the tomatoes, but maybe they're not good for the cucumbers. What the hell do I know? You just named three of the best things that are catch-alls for almost every fertilizing composting situation. Banana peel, fantastic. Eggshells, slow release calcium and some other minerals, perfect. Crunch them up if you can, because that way you won't have some other problem. Like if there's too much egg left in there, you can get critters, a lot of egg eating animals in the world that will be drawn to the smell of what's left of that egg. So crunch those up. And coffee grounds, a lot of internet fluff will say that that'll acidify your soil, and that's not true. You can't, if you're going to acidify your soil with coffee grounds, you are going to literally need enough coffee to kill you and your entire family. Well,
so
I do drink enough coffee
because you'll be dead.
I do drink enough coffee to kill me and my entire family, so maybe I shouldn't be putting it all out there.
No, you couldn't. People who want to actively acidify their soil have to go to enormous lengths to place sulfur, elemental sulfur, at giant quantities into their soil to get a pH change. We're doing it here to try to. We have neutral soil, which is a little bit rare for where we are. Most of soil here is pretty slightly acidic, in the sweet spot for where you can grow just about anything.
And you know this, and anybody can know this because you can get your soil tested for free.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Get your soil tested. Any sort of local extension. Every state has a ag department and everyone you can name, what school it's Penn State in Pennsylvania, it's Cornell here in New York State. Amazing ag departments where they'll test anything you want. You go online, you can look up a laundry list, and a lot of the stuff at Cornell, you want to go beyond the soil test, you have to pay for that, but you can get just about anything tested you want. Heavy metals, how much nitrogen is in my soil, they'll give you a basic pH. And if you're serious about gardening, you should know that. You should start from that position, because a lot of Google searches that you'd want to do are how to grow something, fill in the blank, my type of soil. It'll give you so much more information about what to do right and wrong.
So let's go to composting. Is it hard? Is it easy? Is it effective? Is it a good thing to do? I love it. I've never really been very successful with it, but I know a lot of people are. I've seen your house. You're very serious about it. You've got all kinds of different mixes. And don't you just have a compost just with cat shit in it or something?
We do. We compost pet waste, and I'm going to give a big caveat on that. We do it because I know how to and where the destination of that is going to go. It's going to go in nothing that will ever be edible.
You would not recommend that we do that?
I would. You can I don't want to tell people not to do something you can do. You can absolutely recycle your pet waste. If you have enough space, the best way to do it is to get a 55-gallon trash can and bury it. Cut the bottom off it first. Cut the bottom completely off it, bury it in its entirety, and just put your pet waste in there in perpetuity. The ground and the organisms in the ground will do the rest. If they can get in from the bottom or from holes you've drilled in the side, and the water can get in, it will happen. Now, every time you take off that top, put the top back on. Don't leave a pit of poop that your child,
poop pit, right? You don't want to put
dogs
poop pit.
Or a stray elderly person can fall into, because that will really be bad for all your gardening money will go to pay the medical bills for that stray elderly person. So put the top on it. Air will get in from the soil, and you can, that's a really effective way to be putting waste, because all animal waste goes back into the environment in nature. So you can do that, but I know you're talking about just regular composting.
Regular composting.
Unfortunately, there's no such thing as regular composting. There are lots of different types of composting, and they're all, if you're composting, you're doing great. Don't let people tell you, don't put this in it, or don't do this, or there's even now a machine where you can do it on we're thinking about getting one. That's just basically those machines basically add heat so that...
the ones that you sit in your kitchen, they're like the Lumi or Roomy, whatever. Yeah, those are...
They're creating an artificial environment through technology that it's called hot composting. You could do it. You can do it outside, because bacteria, composting microorganisms will heat, and then they'll kill off themselves, and then the ones that can survive in hotter temperatures will come in and start doing it even faster and more aggressively. Then they'll kill off themselves, producing even more heat. That's why when you go to big composting organizations, like the place where you get your compost, almost certainly the municipal, they've got these giant steaming piles.
Yeah, I want to see the machine that basically they just take all the leaves from the town and turn that into the compost.
If you put your hand all the way into the center, you'll burn your hand. Your next stop will be the hospital.
Really?
That's how hot composting can get, because there are microorganisms called thermophiles and hypothermophiles. They're related to the bacteria that live in the hydrothermal vents. If you ever go to Yellowstone or see a hydrothermal pool and those colors in there, those are living organisms. Relations of those are composting, decomposing organisms that come in when something rots so fast and with all the right mechanisms that it just heats itself up. Heat doesn't escape. It just keeps going and going and going. You've got 150, 160, sometimes 180 degree temperatures inside the center of your compost. That is cooking, literally cooking. And at that point, the decomposition happens so fast that if you can sustain that, that's why people buy bins that you can turn. You can add the air and water, and you can keep that heat in there for as long as possible. You can get compost in as little as months and not years. It'll just go so fast.
Yeah, I got one of those bins and I haven't put it together. It's a burden. So, but you don't really need one of those if you have some space and a yard. So what else do you want to say about composting for the beginner composter?
I'm glad the principles of composting are, what does it, you need in order to do it properly at home? You need, what are called greens. That's nitrogen materials. That's material that has most recently been alive. And then browns, you can think of it as material that has been dead for a longer period of time, but that's not it. Wood shavings, dried leaves, anything that is scientifically we would refer to it as cellulose or lignin. It's the hardest parts to decompose. So a combination of your rotting vegetables, greens, things that have just most recently been alive, lots of nitrogen inside, combined with browns, things that have been with us dead a lot longer. And so all the nitrogen's gone and it's mostly just carbon. The bacteria, the decomposing microorganisms take the nitrogen and the carbon, they feed off those two things together and create the composting reaction. The only two other things you need to provide, or that the environment needs to provide, are water and air, because they need oxygen. Let's go back to our discussion about oxygen is our friend. If you have an anoxic or anaerobic composting situation, my dad, his first attempt at composting was he put all of his lettuce into a sealed container for a year and got the most disgusting, putrefied, smelling, horrible mess that was only the size of a baseball. And he was horrified. He said, composting is a sham. Is no, Dad. You forgot you had everything, almost everything, except the one thing that is absolutely required is air. You need oxygen for all these, the thermophiles and the mesophiles and all these decomposing bacteria. They need oxygen. So that's why people turn their composting pit. That's why people put worms into sedentary pits they don't want to turn. Just the action, the worms going through. The worms will also eat material and help the process. But they also create tunnels, and air follows behind the worms. That's a lot of how we do it here. It's just piles of contained material that we just let sit, and Mother Nature does the rest.
I have these trash cans in my house, behind my house, out on the outside of the fence, because the compost attracts critters, and I really don't want them in the perimeter here. Got enough problems, and that's all I do. I just dump the organic material in those trash cans. They got holes all throughout them, and that's it. It's all I do. It's a mess in there. And I don't know if I need to go in there and stir it or mix it or add grass or leaves, but that's all I do.
Suggestion, the drilling of the holes essentially guaranteed that you were going to have the most important thing, which is air. Bacteria come. You don't need to add anything. Folks, don't buy the things that say you need to add the bacteria or add the special composting organisms. They come free in the environment. They're everywhere. They're on your body right now. Don't be scared.
How dare you? Do I need to stir it?
You can stir it, but you don't necessarily need to. If you stir it, you will be helping it because you put the lid back on so the critters don't. The water, the moisture inside stays fairly self-contained, and so it won't.
Oh, I actually don't have lids on them.
Well, then the critters get in.
They do, but they don't get in They don't come across the fence, I hope.
Okay. Well, if you put the lid on, if you don't put the lid on, the rain comes in, and so the rain refreshes the water inside. So you've got that. The water is the key. The composting organisms are already there, and so something that people sometimes miss and why their compost might be somewhat out of alignment is the brown part. You need brown, so that's whenever you would get sawdust if you cut a tree, throw it in there. If you get newspapers or any sort of just generic, not plasticky paper, but we shred our Amazon boxes, and shredded cardboard is an excellent brown. We put all of our Amazon boxes into a shredder, put all of those shreddings into our compost. That creates an amazing environment for fungal decomposers to just eat up all that kitchen waste and produce a much more balanced compost.
Wow, I'm glad you mentioned that. You can,
because paper and cardboard are just trees in another form. So they're that same
but if it has
kind
a lot
of
of ink,
sawdust.
what if it has a lot of ink in it, like the newspaper or even the cardboard?
Inks used to be have heavy metals in them, but a cheaper way to do ink in modern times has been to use vegetable dyes or dyes that are more environmentally friendly, that actually do degrade. And so, with some exceptions, toner's one of them. Most inks that are used in printing, the cheapest versions, and so that's the one people use, are vegetable based or some sort of biodegradable base.
What about at the end of the year? Your kids got all these, getting close to that time, all these folders and notebooks. Probably you could take the paper out of them instead of throwing it in the garbage, throw that in the compost to help.
Sure.
All right. Yeah. I'll go for it. Anything else about composting that people need to know?
Don't be afraid.
Okay. Go for it, folks. I want to ask you, you talked to me about the, quote, flower industrial complex and why Big Flower doesn't want you to care for your flowers, so you just keep coming back for more. Who are these insidious executives and capitalists at Big Flower?
Big Flower wants you to keep up with the Joneses. Big Flower wants you to look at your neighbor's spring flower display, all the bulbs that we're used to seeing at this time of year, the daffodils and the tulips and all the other lovelies, and be like, man, Pete's got the most amazing flower display. I've got to buy more. My flowers don't look like that. Why do my flowers not look like that? Pete's flowers come back every year. Why do my flowers not come back every year? I'm just going to buy more flowers because I want my yard to look as good as Pete's does. The key, there's a secret the Big Flower doesn't want you to know. Your bulb flowers, they want to live. They want to come back to you. They would not have been able to evolve a situation in which their end game was death, forever death. So the bulb wants to work with you, and it's a lot of people will make it seem like this is hard. It's not hard. It just requires, again, another sacrifice that some people are not willing to make. The key to all bulb flowers coming back is to let them go through their natural cycle all the way to the end. And the other thing is, if you really want to do it up well, cut the heads off.
What?
Cut the heads off of your flowers when the petals and the beautiful part fades. Physically go out and cut the heads off. The reason you do that is because the plant will try to produce seed. A lot of modern tulips and hyacinths, daffodils can't. They bred look well, they have bred to do their natural cycle. So they're going to try to do something they can't do anyway. By cutting off that head, it's called deadheading, you immediately send the signal to the flower, to the bulb, the underground living part that you are trying to nurture. You say, I've been castrated. I have no reproductive pieces left. I must strive to live again, to try next year. And that's ultimately what you want. So you go around neutering and giving hysterectomies to all of your flowers so that they will say, screw you, I'm coming back next year. And then the next part, this is the hardest part. Let them go all the way to brown and dry, because that is their natural state. Their natural state is to use the rest of that time, usually only about a month, and they will soak up all the sun, get all the nutrition they can from the soil. You will not see nothing above ground will look nice. Trust. Below ground, that bulb is getting bigger and bigger the longer you let it go. We let ours go all the way to the end, and we get so many compliments every year on how nice the displays look. And we do not replant them. And I'll tell you, in June around here, it gets dicey. It looks like can get to look a little Grey Gardens outside, but it's not. as soon as it's dry enough where you're like, okay, I can't take it anymore. These tulips, these hyacinths, they're brown. They're brown. Okay, that's the time. Cut it down, mow it down, take your, go out there, bury everything. That's another thing you can do. Bury it in mulch, get it out of your sight, but let it go to that point, because then next year you save yourself all that replanting. You don't have to replant anything. And if you really do it well, they'll divide underground. So if you let if things are hopping and going real, gangbusters, and it's a good year, good moisture, good nutrition for them, you put one bulb in the ground, next year you'll get one, the flower, and two little ones next to it. And then the next year after that, you'll get 3 flowers and six little bulbs.
Oh.
And you can really go gangbusters. And see, let's bring it back to Big Flower. Big Flower doesn't want you growing your own flowers, because then you're not buying flowers from Big Flower.
That's right. And they're expensive. Flowers are very expensive. And there's no guarantee they're going to live or not get eaten in my neighborhood by deer or whatever else.
Yeah. Know that deer only go for certain things. If you're tulips, they love, all the mammals love tulips. Daffodils, I don't know how people feel about daffodils. Mammals won't touch them.
Really?
They'll get digestive issues, makes them sick. Underground animals won't touch them. Deer won't touch them. Too late
to grow daffodils?
You got to put those in the fall. Yeah. Put them in September and October. But that's a flower that if you let that top part go all the way to brown, they will multiply underground into beautiful drifts.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of those around here that have done just that. My final question for Gardening with Kevin, the spring installment, and hopefully we can do more and take more questions from people listening, is about invasive species and your thoughts on them. Because, everything is everywhere now, it would seem, in the air and the water and the ground. And if you go to a nursery, they will often tell you, don't plant these things because they're from Japan, they're from Asia, whatever it is. When it comes to shrubs, bushes, trees, anything else, what are your rules? What are Kevin's rules and thoughts and ethics on, I guess invasive species is different than non-indigenous, isn't it?
Yeah. The terms matter. So, don't get hung up on the terms, but it's native means that it was here before European settlers in North America, and presumably it's still here now. Invasive species are, let me back up. Non-native is it came from someplace else. It's here now, but it isn't, quote unquote, causing a problem that people can say, here's the problem. Invasive species came from someplace else and are causing a problem.
Got it.
Actually, and taking over. Now, my number one advice is probably going to be different from most people's. It's forgive yourself. Seek forgiveness from yourself, because I'll tell you an anecdote. If you were to wake up one morning and a godlike force, had removed every non-native species from your backyard, your garden, or your lawn, you would walk outside to what would look like a hellscape. The grass most likely would be gone. The clover would be gone. A lot of your trees would be gone. The bees would be gone. You would think that you were the victim of a terrible dystopian nightmare. So if you get too hung up on, was this here before Europeans, that ship has sailed.
Right.
So the way we do it here, I have a lot of things that did not evolve on this continent and don't belong here. I keep watch over everything into how it's contributing to the natural environment that we want to foster. So I'll give you an example. We're planning a lumber lot this year to reforest an acre of our property back to oaks, where we don't have a single oak on our property. If you went back in time, this space 400 years ago, oak would have been the predominant tree here. There's not a single one here right now that I did not put in. The invasives that we talked about as far as plants go, I went into the forest, do this every year, and I cut out the greatest offenders, the buckthorns, multiflora rose, Asian honeysuckle. They are the invasives are the predominant species in our farm. That won't be the case over time because I'll be reformatting it to native species. But if people want to consider those things as something that they would like to remove, just remove them, cut them down, learn how to carefully poison. That's a whole class for another podcast. Carefully poison the organism so that it doesn't come back, and you're not spraying so much glyphosate around that you kill everything in your soil. Don't do that.
That's the pesticide.
Roundup. That's Roundup.
Roundup.
Yeah. We can have a whole other
next time.
Thing on Roundup. Roundup. Don't people don't use Roundup. Try to learn about how not to use Roundup. Anyways, and so our the bottom line on that is our farm is covered in invasive species, and I am doing the best I can to put back things that would have been here before, not because I want to go into a time machine and live in the past. A healthy, natural landscape with organisms, especially the highest order organisms like oaks, that were here before, create the healthiest environment because they attract the ecosystem that was meant to be managed here where you live. So putting in native species is going to be good every time you do it. Taking away invasives is going to be good every time you do it, and forgive yourself. Do not try to go on a quest because you absolutely cannot. Too many things that are now considered naturalized in North American environment. Don't fight this. Just like we talked about, not fighting dandelions. Just when you're feeling bad about it, just tell yourself, almost every person's lawn in North America is made up of constituents of non-native species.
Right, non-native
species. It just is.
Breaking up there a little tiny bit. But yes, got it. I love the psychological aspect of your advice and the compassion that you're asking us to have for ourselves. I'm being serious. Like, it's helpful to think the way that you're instructing us to, because you get so hung up on if you're doing things the quote right way, the ethical way, if you should do this, do that, because it's not just you, we're borrowing the land, and I like the way that you talk about these things, of course, and I know everybody else does too.
I'll say one last thank you for that. I'll say one last thing tangentially along the same lines as when you want to spray something. If you have a rose bush that you absolutely adore, and it is just covered head to toe with aphids, and people are telling you, well, let the ladybugs eat your aphids. Well, that's not going to happen. That rose bush is going to die before the ladybugs come to help you, unless you can somehow Dr. Doolittle a message to them. And you go and you learn about what you want to spray. Know what you're spraying on there. Get some recommendations for some things that are labeled organic. Plenty of knockdowns are not as bad as others. There's definitely a hierarchy of hardcore synthetic chemicals or derivatives of chrysanthemum that are organic and that they will kill the aphids, but they just don't last long. You got a day's worth of efficacy. So, this is a scale. and be okay with saying, I have a problem. I've recognized a problem. I'm going to treat it. But don't firebomb the place. And then that's, again, forgive yourself. Go out, treat. I want my roses to be nice. Or I don't want my tree to die, so I'm gonna spray it with this. And remember certain things that will make you feel better. Never spray an insecticide when anything is in bloom. That's an easy rule. It's easy for people to remember. No flowers. Don't let an insecticide hit flowers. And then don't overuse it. Overusing it, you'll kill the predators that were probably trying to help you, but you couldn't Dr. Doolittle talk to them, so you killed them all. And then, you know, in moderation, say a prayer and forgive yourself.
Kevin Richberg, I can't thank you enough for all of your advice today, and let's do it again. I hope people will send questions. I'm going to share this, post it, of course, everywhere. You're an American treasure, sir.
Thanks, Pete.
All right, there he goes, Kevin Richberg. Go check out Slate Hill, edibleforest.com. Go follow Kevin on the social medias. And if you're in upstate New York, central New York, just stop by the farm, Slate Hill, edibleforest.com. It's an amazing place. And Kevin and his husband, Zach, are great guys, good friends of mine, good friends of my family now. And I'm so grateful that he joined us and look forward to doing that more often with him. Go like and join if you're on Facebook and you're into gardening, the Facebook Garden Stand-Up Garden Group. Stand-Up Garden Group. I can never remember what I named it. We have over 1,000 members. A lot of really fun ideas, people sharing their ideas, their successes, their failures, and more over there. And that is all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you'll go subscribe if you haven't already. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick. I've said all the things I think I need to say for one day. Here's a quote from one of my favorites, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, "Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail." Ooh, I like it. Thanks. I think my brother did that for me. I mean, I know he did. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Thanks, man. Appreciate you. Hope to see you tonight's hangout. John Carroll, take us away.
All you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for loss, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up, stand up, got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up, people got the power. come on, stand